That's right, we finally got it. This is the UGREEN DXP4800GT, part of a new series known as the UGREEN GT series of NAS devices. Rocking out with an AMD integrated graphics processor, support of ECC RAM, support of U.2 and SATA storage media, arriving with both storage bays on the front, M.2s on the base. It arrives with dual 10 gig networking there on the rear. This thing is a banger, and let's talk about the design. Again, I've already talked about this in other videos, and I know what a loser statement it is when we're talking about a server that's going to live in a cupboard and never get looked at. But the black and rose gold design on this is just stupidly eye-catching. I'm going to let you behind the scenes a little bit. Back in March of this year, I did a video at UGREEN's headquarters. We were looking into their Kickstarter and looking into 2 years of NAS sync. I saw this device in some of their test areas there. I saw it going through the process, and I won't lie, I thought it was going to be like the white NAS. It was going to be a device that wasn't going to get released outside of China. And for a while it looked that way. We saw it appearing on Chinese websites, but it's gone global. Now, pricing wise, there's a couple of caveats there. We'll talk about the 4-bay first. It's launching at the RRP of $659. However, it's currently available now at 20% off. There's a link below. And again, if there's a code, I'll add that as well. But use that link below and you will get hold of this device at $527.99. The 2-bay you can pick up, RRP at $509. But with that discount via the code below, it is $399. So again, yes, this is a review. They have supplied the unit. They're not sponsoring it, but if you do want to support what we do, the links are down there. But stay until the end of the video because it's really important, because this may not be for you. In terms of design, I chuffing love it, as already mentioned. They're still using exactly the same chassis. It's still metal all the way around. It's still got that removable mesh panel there on the rear for maintenance when you're cleaning the device. The base panel has got the two M.2 NVMe's alongside the SODIMM memory, 2 SODIMM slots, DDR4. I will come back round to the memory later on, actually, because there's a few weird little eccentricities about this device that I do think are worth talking about. But focusing on the storage, each one of these bays here inside, it goes into a SATA controller, but it's an AMD Fusion kind of native SATA controller inside there, and that is based on a Gen 3 x16 because it's part of the whole system. I saw no restrictions there inside. But crucially, the inside back panel there has support for SATA drives like normal, SAS drives, and U.2. Now, I don't have any U.2 drives here in the studio, but you can get U.2 adapters, NVMe adapters going inside, and that will hopefully allow you to make the most of those 10 gig NICs there on the rear. Now, again, I'm trying to sort out some adapters, and then we'll do some follow-up performance on this for those. But at the very least, when it comes to the SATA drives, they're inside. I comfortably saw performance in terms of read and write, hitting with 4 SATA SSDs that I did have, so you go Unwolf SSDs, performance of around 1.3 gigabytes per second read and 600 to 700 megabytes per second write, but I got that up closer to 1 gigabyte when I played around with some of the block sizes. These are all synthetic, but neither of those were ever really going to show me the full potential performance of those 2 10 gig NICs there on the rear. Playing around with the M.2s. I've got 2 M.2s in a RAID 0 environment, and I saw read speed just in excess of 1.45 gigabytes per second and write performance of 1.1 gigabytes per second there along the base. So again, full saturation of those 2 10 gig NICs. I would argue in a 4-bay configuration like this isn't really going to be that feasible unless you're utilizing some particularly high performance SSDs. But what about those M.2s there on the base? Why was I not able to saturate more than that? Well, a big part of that is because both of those SSDs are on Gen 3 x 2 architecture. That means that both of them were never going to be able to give me, even on their own, more than about 1.5 to 1.6 gigabytes per second. So that's what I mean. Only, I think, with 4 U.2 drives across the whole configuration, are we ever going to see this fully saturate those 2 10 gigs from a single storage area? That still means there's a lot of, aim for the sky, but just keep that in mind with regards to grounding what the external and internal performance of this can be. That said, talking of storage, one of the things I did find a bit of a bummer, and it's not going to be a bummer for everyone, but I know it will be for some, The main operating system drive on this is an eMMC storage module. It's a 64 gig eMMC. I found that out because when I was going into the system, I was just curious, wanting to know what the operating system drive was, when the majority of UGREEN NAS devices in the past have always featured either a little 2242 drive inside, or maybe even 2280 SSD that you could stick on your own operating system. Unfortunately, it didn't appear via BIOS. I could only see the 4 and the 2 drives when I was doing the hard drive testing. And when I dug in further, it is an eMMC inside. So what that means in real terms, although it's not impossible to stick your third-party operating system of choice on this, it does mean you can completely eradicate that drive inside. And sticking another operating system on this is not going to be anywhere near as clear-cut as previous generation devices. And I would also argue whether that does become problematic in your warranty support. That's something only time will tell on. I'm going to raise that with UGREEN on this now. I've been doing some of my deeper testing. They're seeing this the same time as you, by the way. As mentioned, they've supplied the hardware. This isn't a sponsored video in the whole give me money, we need to preview your video sort of way. But what about noise? This is the same chassis, but with a more egregious network profile and a more egregious drive profile. How did that impact the noise in this chassis as a whole? And I'm pleased to say it's pretty good. Pretty much what I expected, just like its predecessors. So for example, in idle, I saw the system in noise level around 36 to 38 dBA, bearing in mind this was when I had those larger hard drives, 24 TBs and 30 TBs inside there. So that was actually pretty respectable for a metal chassis running big, hard multi-platted aggressive drives to the standard they were. But you can also play with the fans on this system, setting them to high or low or leaving them on auto. So I put the fans down to their lowest setting with the drives in idle, and I saw the dBA go to around 38 dBA, so pretty much what there was before. And when I was running SSDs, it knocked 2 to 3 dBA off it, but that's pretty much the floor. 38 dBA is the floor for this device. When I set the fans up to their maximum, that was intriguing, because obviously the noise is going to be mostly generated from the rear, but putting the fans up to their highest setting resulted in the front of the device give me an audio level of around 45 to 50 dBA, and on the rear I saw it pretty much constantly sat around 50 dBA. So again, with the fan set to high, it was louder than the drives themselves, but again, the drives of choice you choose to use will make an impact. But what intrigued me is when I went for the read and write, because when you're reading and writing bigger drives, the vibrations cascading throughout the whole device can make all the difference. And I saw the device sat at 45 to 50 dBA. There was a bit of ambient noise during my testing, but still, I would argue around 45 to 50, nearly identical to the fans when they're on their highest, when I had the bigger drives inside. But if you go for classic 4 to 8 TB drives, you can probably knock 5 or 6 dBA off the top there. But overall, for a metal desktop chassis, these are fairly respectable numbers. Now, we'll talk about power consumption in a moment, but I just want to focus a little bit more on that CPU. It's, again, the R2514 AMD processor, 4-core, 8-thread, with integrated graphics. With a TDP at 15 watt, but it can go as low as 12, 13, and as high as 25 to 35. Again, with scaling in BIOS if you want, but just generally it's there when the system needs it. Alongside that, the RAM it arrived with was 8 gig of DDR4 memory. Weirdly, most of the stuff I saw online, this CPU supports a maximum 2600 mega transfer RAM, but it's a 3200 mega transfer module inside of a brand that I'm not really that familiar with, if I'm honest. But it's not ECC RAM. This device does support ECC. The CPU does, and according to the official pages, and indeed in my own testing when I slammed some ECC memory inside, it saw it, but it doesn't arrive with it. So keep in mind that the price you are paying that I mentioned at the top of the video does not include ECC. In 2026, ECC RAM, even in DDR4, is not a cheap proposition. Also, circling back to that CPU and the integrated graphics, I did some multimedia testing there. Two pretty different kinds of tests. I went with some kind of native playback there of a mixture of 8K and 4K media, and the CPU, although I got it to about 80% and then I decided to stop. So at 80% utilization, I had the system running 3 8K files natively and 2 4K files playing natively there. But what about transcoding? Because it is AMD, and native transcoding can be something of a fickle beast and can often require a little bit more command line in the background to open things up. I would say I got the CPU to 80% when I had 3 transcoding sessions of high dense 8K material there. So again, for the price point and the profile, I'm pretty much okay with that, but just keep in mind there that if you are going to use this for Plex, if you are going to use it for Jellyfin, it isn't just simply a case of click, make my CPU hurt and carry on to bed. You will need to play around just the tiniest bit with the CPU to allow the containerized multimedia app to access the integrated graphics out the gate. Now, with this device rolling out on the market, I think there's either going to be existing users of UGREEN NAS products or those that have been considering buying a UGREEN wondering just what that CPU profile brings or doesn't bring compared to the other 4 bays from the portfolio of this company. Now, we're going to ignore the value series, the DH4300. I want to talk more precisely about the CPUs currently available in both the Plus and the Pro series. That's that i3 1315U currently available on the Pro series model, and there is the Intel Gold Pentium that's currently available on the Plus series model. Now, when you go to CPU benchmarking websites, you generally find that this CPU, in the conventional sense, actually ranks lower than those because it's not trying to do what Intel does. It's actually a little bit more power hungry. The integrated graphics sit somewhere between the two. And actually the ranking on most CPU websites place this AMD processor a fraction lower. This CPU is about that support of flash storage there, the advantages in internal throughput that the AMD architecture brings, and of course the integration of ECC memory here, because trying to do that on an Intel platform, you have to go for fairly bananas processors there. So I kind of get it, but just be aware, ultimately, if you are an existing UGREEN 4-bay NAS owner and you're thinking about upgrading, I wouldn't unless you need ECC memory or you want the dual 10 gig architecture, or even the U.2 support there. Those are all kind of embroiled in together with the benefits they bring to one another. Unless any of that is mission critical to you, I don't think this is a suitable upgrade for you. For the rest of you that are on the fence about buying a UGREEN NAS today, there's a lot to like here, and I would argue a little bit more future-proofing than is currently available from the other 4-bay devices in their portfolio. But what about power consumption? This device with that more power-hungry CPU, what did it actually mean in terms of what was getting pulled out of the wall and your Lecky bill? Well, firstly, I pulled all of the hard drive storage media out and just ran it base level with the M.2 inside, the 2 M.2s and the OS drive and nothing else. And the CPU, and in idle, it sat at around 25 watts, which is pretty much bang in the middle of what was reported there on that original TDP rating from the manufacturer's website. I then wanted to see what the power consumption would be with the drives inside, just in case there was anything happening in the background there. And I will say, because I was using more aggressive 24 to 30 TB drives there, they have a base power consumption of around 4 to 5 watts in idle and can go as high as 10 watts when really pushed. So when I had all 4 hard drives populated this inside here, and again, you went for smaller hard drives like your 4 TB, you can get that number down to 2 to 3 watts per drive. But with those 4 big drives inside, the 2 M.2 NVMEs in the base there, I saw power consumption of around 45 watts, and that was with the CPU at only 5% there. So it's pretty much what we would have expected versus that of the no drives 25 watts there. But what about when you'd have all of the drives being accessed and that CPU being rocketed to the moon? And that was during high multimedia testing and indexing happening there in the background, and the drives being accessed in a multitude of different ways. And in that, I saw a power consumption of around 70 to 77 watts during peak. Again, you would have had to work hard to get a 4-bay NAS utilising the other 2 Intels from the Plus and Pro series of 4-bays to reach those sort of numbers in that kind of architecture. I think those sat between 50 to maybe 60, 65 watts at the top. So again, just be aware that with a more power-hungry CPU, it might cost you a little bit more in Lecky bill, but you are talking about the capabilities that come alongside that. But what about the software? Has UGREEN done anything extra in UGOS for this system? And the short answer to that is not really. When you go for a UGOS running on the DXP4800GT, that software is largely the same as what we've seen from UGOS available on the Intel platform. Now, I shouldn't be that surprised. We've seen enough NAS brands with different architecture systems to largely have the same UI, UX, and just OS in general, regardless of the CPU. And it is about balancing them across the different architectures. It's still, for me, a really up-and-coming bit of NAS software. It's not the best in the market, but when you compare it against other Chinese NAS operating system offerings, this is much, much greater than the majority of them. Again, standard file sharing, a native file manager with everything you're going to need available in the web browser, as well as that mobile application. AI-powered photo handling there. Again, that is a newer generation AI photo management tool as well, alongside a dedicated AI portal on this system for managing different AI-linked, be they AI LLM, AI recognition, any of those different AI tools that happen or you install on this system are all managed now via their own individual portal. Alongside that, the virtual machine tool, a containerization tool, support of iSCSI, support of two-factor authentication, dedicated multimedia applications there, network control, schedule on, off and air gapping, an office administration tool, the ability to create SSD caching pools, SSD storage pools. There is a dedicated multi-site backup tool there for both directions, locally, cloud, NAS to NAS, SMB and more, support of all the different file systems you're going to need. It's all there. Unfortunately, there's still no sign of that surveillance application that UGREEN are still working on. There's still no support of write once, read many. There's still no support of encrypted storage pools. That security scanner tool for me is still lackluster. There is still all of the native security measures from auto and semi-automated configurable IP blocking, the system having different layers of security access and credentials for read, write and more for different apps, services and users, and the ability to control a lot of the access remotely on this system in a number of different ways with security provisions. I just get really annoyed that there isn't a security tool that scans for more than malware and viruses. That is not what you want from a NAS tool. I want to know if someone's got a weak password and way too much admin credential. You can set it manually, but I want the security tool to tell me that on the fly. The software this arrives with in previous x86 powered UGREEN NAS solutions, I've just been as critical as I've been today, but it has not been such a pivotal component in the purchase as it has been with the GT because of that eMMC storage there. In other devices in their portfolio, it would have been a great deal easier to replace the drive with another and run TrueNAS, run Unraid, run Open Media Vault, run Zimmer OS. But because of that eMMC, we have to be a lot more critical about the operating system being part of the overall value package. I think this is priced well for what it is. I think the design is 9 out of 10, maybe even 9.5. I haven't even talked about this being one of the NAS devices still in the market that features SD card slots, that features front-mounted USB Type-C, that features HDMI out with a dedicated HDMI portal application. It has all the bells and whistles and is presented in a really lovely way. But just bear in mind that the movement over to the AMD platform, the movement over to an eMMC storage drive for the operating system brings with it pros and cons that aren't available in the rest of the UGREEN NAS. And therefore, this has to be a little bit more of a discerning choice for those thinking about a local on-prem data storage solution. It's a great NAS. I love that it's got ECC support. I love the support of U.2, and I love a couple of big old 10 gig NICs there on the rear. But just know this is a more curated NAS than what we've seen from the brand previously. I love that it exists. I love the innovation in it, and I love that UGREEN are taking this seriously. But just know what you're getting here compared with the slightly more off-the-shelf 4800 Pro or Plus. Again, if you are interested in getting a hold of this NAS, there are links below to get hold of it from UGREEN's site. They are affiliated. We get a small commission here if you use them, and there is that discount if you use them as well at 20% for both the 2 and the 4 bay. But only use those links if you want to support what we do and that you've enjoyed the video. If those two things aren't true, don't worry. But thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.